Okay, so today I want to talk about a little bit what it's like growing up poor in London. Not at all to undermine what it's like growing up poor in any other parts of the country or the world for that matter, because I'm sure there's a lot of problems everywhere you go, but talking about personal experience, what it was like growing up in London. Specific thing that is different about growing up poor in London is that if you're poor in London, you're poor but you're surrounded by wealth. Not just like the big skyscrapers in the city, but there are a lot of people that have quite a lot of money around. There's a lot of people who earn quite a lot of money. And I think a big thing that made it different for me, you know, as you know, is I got into a grammar school at Ilford, and then I went to a school where most of the people were from sort of comfortable, relatively well-off families. You know, when I went to their houses, they had like massive houses. Like at my primary school, it was a lot of sort of Pakistani immigrants, you know, like fresh over, and a lot of them, their houses, obviously their cultural background was different to mine, but their financial situation was quite similar. You know, you went to their house, it was like a crowded house, a lot of people like squeezed into a small house, you know, and that was similar to like my situation. But then when I went into the grammar school, you know, people had their own big bedrooms with a big bed and a big desk, and it was like everything was like nicely done, and like they had like hallways, you know, in the house, a hallway. I remember I went to this one guy's house, Rory Sheen's house, and the stairway like split. He had the stairway that split, and I remember thinking like, this guy's got a stairway that splits, you know what I mean? And like I was sharing this tiny little bedroom with a little bunk bed with my brother, you know, tiny room, like right next to the railway. And if you're poor but everyone around you is poor, I ain't saying that's easy, but it's harder in a sense when you're poor and there's so many people around you who are rich, because it puts a difference between you. And I remember like non-uniform day, right? I didn't have nothing to wear, you know what I mean? Everyone else were like, some people wearing all these designer clothes. I didn't have nothing to wear, and eventually I started wearing school uniform on non-uniform day, you know, because I didn't have nothing to wear.
I had no idea that's why, because I remember you wearing school.
Yeah, because it's just like, I'm not going to play this game, like it's set up against me. But I think, yeah, when you see all that wealth around you, and you're poor, what that does to you is, first of all, it makes you want it. It makes you want it so badly. I think like, it's difficult to be poor, but when you're surrounded by people who have things you don't have, you know what I mean? You know, like, I remember when we all turned like 16, 17 and everyone else was getting driving lessons and they got cars and I couldn't get one, you know what I mean? And what that highlights to you is also how unfair it is, because like you'll probably remember, I started doing a paper round at 13, 364 days a year. I was waking up every single day, 6:45, going out to deliver papers, and no one else was doing that in our school, and yet I was the poorest kid in the school. You know what I mean? It's like, so I'm the only one who's actually working. I'm working every single day of the year except for Christmas Day, and everyone else has got more money than me. And when time comes around for like who's going to get a car, everyone gets a car except me, you know what I mean? And then like people judge you. Like I remember one time like I was hanging around with some girls and they was like, oh, have you seen Raj's new car? You must be doing really well. And I was thinking like, we're 17, what do you think he's doing? You know what I mean? But like people judge you on your financial position when you're a teenager, and they do. And it's stupid, but they do. And people know that you're poor. And when you're 15, 16, it can't possibly be your fault that you're poor, you know what I mean? I was doing everything I could, and I was working a paper round. I was 15, what else could I do, you know what I mean? Waking up 6:45 every day for £12 a week, you know, and I had to save that up every week. But I think that's the specific thing about growing up poor in London. Because you're surrounded by so much wealth, you want it so badly. And I think that's, nowadays with the growth of things like Instagram and Facebook, where it's become like quite fashionable for people to really sort of casually display the things that they have, like holidays or like cars or like watches or clothes. You know, in a sense, I feel we were lucky that we grew up a little bit before that era where it wasn't so easy to display your wealth. But now, like, I think kids are probably on Instagram from like, I don't know, 10 or 11, maybe younger. And then they're gonna see all of these displays of how much wealth and things other people have. And it's always displayed beautifully on Instagram. That's only gonna make it worse, right? Kids are gonna see that, kids from poor backgrounds. They're gonna see it, and it makes you want it. You see it every day. You see it in your life, you see it on Instagram, you see it in the advertisements, you see it in the movies, you see it on the TV. And if you're from a poor background, you know you can't have it. And the other people in London, you'll be surrounded by people who can have it, and you can't have it. And if you hit kids with that every single day, you can't be surprised when they get addicted to online trading. Or maybe they turn to crime, or they start selling drugs, you know what I mean? Or they start getting involved in things like fraud, you know what I mean? Because a big factor which I think is really important is back one generation ago, like we're here in Ilford, it's got a massive Indian community, massive Pakistani community. A lot of our friends, they came over from India, Pakistan, East Africa, one generation, 2 generations ago, with nothing, with not a penny to their name. And they worked and they worked and they worked and they saved and they saved and they saved. And a lot of those families are pretty wealthy now, you know. They've got multiple properties, they're really comfortable, they've got nice quality standard of living. So they lived in an era where even if you grew up in London and you saw this wealth around you, it was true that if you're willing to pull your socks up and work really hard, you could get it. You could get it. So as long as you know, maybe you needed to make a lot of sacrifices, and you know very well, a lot of our parents and our friends' parents did make massive sacrifices. If you are willing to make those sacrifices, you can get those things. But the problem is now, increasingly, for young people, that's not true. So then you're putting young people, you know, especially young men who are very often judged really strictly on their financial success. You're putting them in a situation where they've got nothing. They're surrounded by people who've got things they can't have. They're seeing it displayed to them on Instagram every single day. They're seeing it on the TV and the movies, on the advertisements every single day. But no matter how hard they work, no matter what they do, they can never get that stuff. Like, what is that, right? That is the recipe for a mental health disaster for young men. That is what it is. If you create a situation where you create a desperate, urgent need, and you surround someone with other people who have a thing, and you tell them they can't have it, and you don't give them any legitimate route to getting that thing, you cannot be surprised when these people turn to crime and these people turn to dangerous means of getting it, like online trading and stuff like this. And that's what I've seen, in my opinion, a massive increase in online trading and gambling addictions, because we've created a generation of young men who have had wealth and financial success shoved down their throats for their whole childhoods and have no legitimate means of getting those things. And yeah, I think that's what happens. And yeah, what I was saying before was I think another thing which really drives financial anxiety is when things change in the economy very quickly. So like, if you have a society which is very unequal, but things are not moving quickly, then I think poor people will just accept we're poor. Like, yeah, it's not good, it's shit, we're poor, but we have a community of poor people, and we're all the same and we're all equal. But what we've done in our society is we've shuffled the deck really, really, really quickly. So for our parents' generation, like I've said, it was true that a lot of them were poor, but as long as they worked hard, they could become relatively rich. But for our generation, that's not true. So what that means is we've moved very quickly from a world where everybody had that basic ability to get themselves financially secure, to one where whether you can be financially secure or not is actually out of your control, and it depends on what your parents and your grandparents did. So what that means is then we bear that responsibility of, well, that means if I don't make it, my kids are screwed. You know what I mean? Because we lived in a world where even if you were poor, you could become rich. So that means, like, all I need to do is make sure that my kids are healthy and happy, and then they can make it for themselves. But now we've moved into a world where if you can't give your kids a big inheritance, then they'll probably never get a house. So what that means is, it's not enough for me to be a good father. It's not enough for me to give my parents a stable, happy childhood. I need to make money, otherwise they will not be financially secure. So then, suddenly, people are in a situation where it's not just their necks on the line. It's not just a case of can I get a nice holiday or not. It's not a case of can I get a nice car. It's literally a case of if you don't make it, your kids will not be financially secure. And that's what happens when you create an economy where only kids from rich families can buy houses. That means I need to be rich or my kids will be poor. So suddenly there's so much more pressure on individuals because you need to build up money in order for your kids to have a chance. And that's what happens when you create a society where rich families always stay rich and poor families always stay poor. But we're going to decide now which families are going to be in the rich and which families are going to be in the poor. So then it's like, oh my God, I need to work really hard, really quickly. I need to make that cut because I'm seeing people, like your parents and my parents come from similar financial backgrounds, but now they're in very different financial places, right? And then that's affecting our positions, and it's going to be the same for our kids. So suddenly there's all this additional pressure, like if I don't hustle, if I don't work hard, then that's going to ruin my future chances of my kids. And honestly, I think it's the situation it's creating. It's a mental health disaster, and it's going to lead to increases in kids looking into crime, kids getting into gambling, incidences of fraud. Because if you create a situation where you create a desperation for people to make money, but you don't create a legitimate means for them to make money, it's inevitable that they will look to do it in other ways. It's inevitable, I think.
At the moment, these guys are profiting from a crisis that is going to keep our economy in the stump for 50 years. There is one other thing they can do with that massive amount of income. They can buy your mum's house.